It's Friday, May 10th, and welcome to a special edition of the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker, coming to you from the offices of the New York Amsterdam News in Harlem. On this week's podcast, my special guest is NAACP President and CEO Derrick Johnson, who is talking with us about several issues the civil rights organization is tackling. Celebrating its 110th anniversary this year, the NAACP remains at the forefront on racial justice issues in America. From the police brutality cases to voter suppression, the NAACP continues to be on the front lines of the nation's top issues when it comes to race. Derrick Johnson took the reins as president and CEO of the NAACP in 2017. He's with me on the phone to discuss the current work the organization is doing. Welcome to the podcast, President Johnson.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, first, I just want to know, can you give us some highlights on some of the work that the NAACP is doing right now?
Right. So NAACP, as you mentioned, is a 110-year-old legacy organization. Our focus around civil rights expands from criminal justice to education, environmental justice, health, and several other issues. When I took the helm of this storied organization, I wanted to really focus in on civic engagement, particularly the civic engagement calendar over the next 5 years. Last year's midterm elections, how do we increase voter participation in targeted areas where African Americans' voice in the process could influence the outcome in a way in which it could better reflect our need and interest. Secondly, our work around the census. The census is fundamental to how this democracy works in terms of the resources that get to communities that we care about as it relates to roads, bridges, education, and many other things. And the NAACP must play a strong role to ensure that there is an accurate and complete count of African Americans. Thirdly, we are about to embark on the 2020 presidential election. Our voice and our vote would have a drastic impact on the outcome. And so it's going to be the role of NAACP to ensure that our communities have a clear understanding of the policy options that's confronting us, and whether or not the individual seeking our vote would meet a standard that's appropriate for what we consider as priorities for our communities. Fourthly, redistricting. The drawing of political boundaries determine the outcome of elections for the next 10 years after those boundaries are drawn. Those boundaries are based on census data, and you can draw lines to include, exclude, or provide a fair opportunity. So we're going to be deeply immersed into the redistricting process, and it takes us back around to the 2022 midterm elections. That's a 5-year role. The NAACP is going to really narrow down around a metrically driven targeted campaign for, through the tenure. It's very important for us to be immersed there.
All right. And you're talking about the 2020 election, which is just so important. Can you get a little more detailed about the NAACP's efforts to mobilize the black vote? Because a lot of times they say, and even during the last election, they said we didn't get out there. I beg to differ. I think that we did. But what is being done, to mobilize the black vote?
For us, elections must go beyond just the transactional occurrence of election day. We have implemented a digitally metrically driven program using data. We've seen a tremendous turnout in targeted areas, primarily led by African American women. The black vote outperformed all the indicators that was out there in terms of what was projected to be turnout. It was because of the increased turnout African American vote. We've seen a lot of surprises. Polling is an art form that's losing its luster because it's unable to truly predict the outcome of voters. And so what we're seeing is underappreciation of the black vote. As we go to the polls, the result is an overperformance of the black vote based on predictions. So I'm not for sure who would have said that the turnout was low when it was actually high. But for us as NAACP, we don't think it's high enough. We have more room to grow.
Right. And, pertaining to the 2020 election, there were a lot of accusations that were actually, in some cases proven to be true of voter suppression, especially with the elections in Georgia and Florida. Can you tell us about what the NAACP is doing to combat voter suppression?
This past election cycle, we filed perhaps more lawsuits leading up to the election cycle and during election day than we've done in a very long time, and definitely we've done more of that during a midterm elections. Whether it was jurisdictions seeking not to put people who had legally registered on the rolls in time to participate, seeking to close polling places to make it more difficult for African Americans to get to the opportunity to vote. On election day, opening polls but not providing the power cords for machines to function, and resulting in people standing in lines for 4 hours. And we filed a lawsuit to force the jurisdictions to hold the polling place open an additional 4 hours to make up for the lost time. Any number of issues you can conceive of to suppress the black vote, we've seen this past election cycle. And for the NAACP, because we have units and members across the country in almost every community, right. We were able to respond timely with lawsuits to open up or stop some of the practices whenever we were able to identify them timely.
Okay. One of the big stories that came out recently was a situation in Louisiana involving the burning of the black churches. Can you tell us about the work the NAACP is doing on that? And just on the topic of hate crimes in general, we're seeing a spike in hate crimes, all across the board. And I just want to know from you about the work that the organization is doing to help with that.
The Washington Post did some research, and they realized that there was upwards or more than a 200% increase in racial hate crimes in areas where the president spoke. Wherever you found rallies or speeches or visits by President Trump, they were able to track that there was a huge increase in racial violence. And for us, we recognized early on that intolerance and racial hatred was actually germinating from the White House. It has given license to individuals who feel it is okay, it's acceptable to display their racial hatred and intolerance. But in NAACP, we are monitoring, we're responding to try to get local law enforcement engaged to protect vulnerable communities. But we are in a unique and difficult time. Anytime you have groups who feel it's okay, Charlottesville, Virginia, to march openly, spewing racial hatred and weaponize a car to kill a white woman. Anytime you have individuals thinking it's okay to walk into a church in Louisville, Kentucky, when the church door was locked, to go to a grocery store and kill people because they're black, or an individual who decided to go to a synagogue in Pittsburgh and walk into a service and create a mass murder. We have a problem in this country, but it's not a problem that's new, because our founder, W.E.B. Du Bois, said the question of the 21st century is the question of race, and we're still dealing with the question of race because people seek to maintain power by creating a target group. Mm-hmm. And anytime you have a target group and there's levels of insecurity, we see these type of incidents.
Right. And I also wanted to ask you about police brutality. I know this wasn't actually in one of the questions, but I thought about it because of the recent video, of course, what happened in Florida with the young man who was slammed down, I think it was 15 or 16, slammed down to the ground by police. We're seeing more and more of these videos. It's nothing new to us. We've seen it for years, but with the advance and the cell phones and everything like that, we're just seeing it more and more, and we're seeing it on the news. I know that there was a rally recently in Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale, Broward County area for that case, but we're seeing more and more of these cases happening, and more the local chapters are mobilizing. Can you tell us about those efforts?
It is a good and bad seeing that at any given time, citizens can become instant reporters because of social media and all of the many devices we have. We believe that what we're seeing today is being opened up because of cell phones and small video cameras. So it's being captured. We have long heard of stories in the African American community concerning the treatment of our young people, the treatment of our community as a whole at the hands of police officers.
Right.
And so this is not a new phenomenon. What's new about this, we're able to capture it and show in the public the unfortunate incidents of how this plays out, and the justifications that are given. It don't pass the smell test. For the NAACP, accountability is important. We want police officers to be able to protect and serve, but not be aggressive in terms of how they treat our community. We're not criminals by nature. We are citizens who pay taxes that fund the paychecks of those police officers, and we want to be treated fairly. Our strategy, our goal is to make sure that there's stronger accountability mechanisms. Police officers are law enforcement officers, but that don't place them above the law.
Right.
And so we want better accountability in public policy. In addition to that, district attorneys need to be at a position where they're not so aligned with police officers, they overlook the police officers who break the law. Mm-hmm. And so we are calling for district attorneys to apply the law equally when individuals break the law. You know, going after young people who are selling loose cigarettes,
right,
oftentimes is a waste of time when you have law enforcement officers who are breaking the law and terrorizing communities. We need to adjust our thinking around what it means to protect and serve, as opposed to be aggressive policing and creating environments where our young people are at risk for being young people.
Right. I have to ask you this: we're in the midway through Donald Trump's first term in office. Has President Donald Trump or anybody from his administration made any attempts recently to invite you or anybody from the NAACP to meet at the White House?
I have yet to see this president reach across any comfort line that he may have, whether it's African American community or any other community. We have yet to see this president speak at an African American event. We have yet to see this president do anything that goes outside of the image that he thinks should be in place. It's been decades since we've seen this level of tone deafness around the need to promote a society that's inclusive of all people. It is easy for us to say this is the racist president we've had in recent history. And that statement I'm not taking lightly, but it's based on his statements about countries of African descent as whole countries. It's based on his policy position. It's based on his actions. And unfortunately, he has done nothing to try to repair the divide that is growing in this country, and much of that divide is germinating from his administration. And that's an unfortunate commentary to have in 2019.
Okay. Does the NAACP believe that, there's this issue that keeps coming up about his message and voice to white supremacists. Do you think that he is emboldening white supremacists?
I don't think he's emboldening white supremacists. He is emboldening white supremacists.
Okay, all right.
You know, the study results that if you have a 200+% increase in racial hate crimes in areas where he goes to speak, that speaks volumes. Anytime you try to create false equivalencies when you have a racial hate group who protest, and you have caught up protesters saying that this is not acceptable, and he say, well, there are good people on both sides. No, they're not good people on both sides. There's only one side, and that's the side of inclusion and respect for human dignity and decide to say that all people are not created equal and some people should go back to where they come from when we all come from somewhere else unless we are Native Americans.
All right. And I want to shift the conversation back. You talked about it before about the 2020 census. It's a very important thing. We have to fill it out. Tell us about the NAACP's work in making sure that blacks are counted.
Well, we are in the midst of a lawsuit against the Trump administration because they are intentionally underfunding the number of enumerators, individuals who go out and knock on the doors.
Okay, I didn't know about that.
Which will result in an undercount. That lawsuit is active right now. In addition to that, we're going to be working with several jurisdictions to try to figure out how do we get the word out so that people know to fill the form out. And this will be the first census where you can fill the form out on a digital platform.
Okay.
And so we are in the early stages of building out a campaign to do just that. We have to make sure that we have an accurate count because if we don't, our communities will be robbed of the necessary federal resources, and those federal resources, there'll be overrepresentation in other communities. What people may not realize, in African American and in poor communities, there's always undercount. But in an affluent communities, there's overcount because people are being counted twice.
Oh, okay.
They're counted for multiple residents.
Oh.
So if you have someone with a domicile and another residence, in some cases they're being counted twice. So you get an overrepresentation of one demographics and a complete underrepresentation of another demographic. That results in federal appropriation dollars being disproportionately provided in high wealth affluent communities and not in low wealth communities. And you sometimes wonder, well, why are these roads different? Why are these bridges not as stable? Because there's been an overrepresentation in the count. Therefore, the federal dollars flow to areas based on census counts.
Okay. And this is actually an issue involving the census that I'm going to ask about, not just here in New York City, but in other cities across the country. And that's the question of citizenship. That's a question that's going to be on the census, so they're trying to get on there. What is the NAACP's position on that?
We absolutely oppose adding the census question on the census form. It is not necessary. We believe the goal is to create a chilling effect so individuals who are already predisposed of not trusting government will simply not fill out the form. The census has nothing to do with whether or not you're a citizen. The goal of the census is try to gather the necessary data so that we know as a country where we are in terms of population size, growth, and trends. And when you put a question on there, it creates a chilling effect. That chilling effect could possibly represent a count that's already going to be, that will already be plagued with undercounts and overcounts, but now you are accelerating the undercount in ways in which that's more about political outcomes than it is accuracy of the data that we all rely on so that we can make sure the resources are where they need to be to support the society.
Okay. I know this is the 110th anniversary this year of the NAACP, which is just a monumental thing. Ironically, this is the 110th year of the Amsterdam News as well. We were founded in the same year, so just kind of a little parallel there. But tell us a little bit about, there's some things going on. I know that the NAACP is doing their Jamestown to Jamestown initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely. This year, like every year, is a monument year. It was the 50th anniversary of our Image Awards, where we created an opportunity to acknowledge individuals in the entertainment industry for projecting positive images of who we are as a community, as a people. It is the 110th year of the founding of the NAACP, which is really important because we've been able to, through many decades, still exist and still function at a level where we can represent the needs and interests of our community. But it's also the 400-year recognition of the transatlantic slave trade. And as a result of that, we must, as an organization, as a community, as a society, recognize the journey that brought us to this place and reconnect with the continent and the African diaspora. We're partnering with the country of Ghana. As you may know, that many people understand that as one of the places of no return. We have the slave dungeons there. And so we're going to be taking a delegation over there in partnership with the country that's that has now titled it the Year of Return for the NAACP. Is also significant because one of our key founders of the organization is laid to rest there, W.E.B. Du Bois, and there's a Du Bois Center. So we want to go back and pay special recognition to Dr. Du Bois, but he's also the founder of the Pan-Africanist movement.
Okay. And
so this is an opportunity to reconnect with the African diaspora as we begin to think about our future through the prism of the journey that brought us here.
Okay. And what's the best way, folks? Because are people able to be part of that if they want to be, or is it too late? Is there still an opportunity to be part of that?
Absolutely. If you go to our website, naacp.org, you click on Jamestown to Jamestown. You can sign up. There are packages there. There's a week-long or 10-day activity of tours and discussions around it. We will go to the Du Bois Center. We will go to slave dungeons. It was a great opportunity. And so the slots are filling up fast, but please go to naacp.org and click on tab that says Jamestown to Jamestown and sign up. It'll show you the packages. I think it's two packages. There's one that's the 18th through the 25th, and another one that's the 18th through the 28th.
Okay, great. And I need to ask you about the NAACP National Convention that's happening this summer. I believe it's in Detroit. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. We will be convening the 110th annual convention in Detroit, Michigan. Delegates from across the country will be in attendance. We will have a series of conversations, including the presidential candidates will be joining us, along with many other top voices in our communities or voices who impact our community. We're just pleased to be in Detroit this year. We'll be in Boston, Massachusetts next year. It is our annual conference that gives our delegates the opportunity to convene through our legislative process, and it is through that process which sets our policy priorities for the following year.
Okay. And let me just say, I've been to an NAACP convention before. It's definitely a wonderful opportunity to meet people, know what's going on, and get mobilized, and also bring stuff back to your communities to be able to spread the message that you all have. The NAACP always has a movement to grow. I know it's been part of the Black experience here in America, again, for 110 years. What's the best way people can get involved with their local chapter, wherever they are, whether they're here in New York or anywhere else? What's the best way people can get involved?
For those of you who would like to text us at 40649, text the word NAACP to the number 40649. We will add you to our communication list, and we can answer any questions. Or you can go online, naacp.org, and we can connect you to either one. Text the number 40649. Text the word, NAACP to the number 40649.
Okay. And we'll definitely put that on the website so that folks can know how to get connected with you all, as well as a link to the NAACP website, as well as a link to the local chapter here in New York City. Hazel Dukes does phenomenal work. If you all know her, Dr. Hazel Dukes, I've known her for years, does phenomenal work here in New York City with the NAACP. So it's always nice to know where you can go in your community, in your city, to know where the office is. So, all right. Well, listen, thank you so much, Mr. President Johnson. We really appreciate you being on the podcast. We hope to certainly have you again, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was NAACP President President Derrick Johnson with us on the podcast today. Wonderful conversation. He's always a phenomenal person. He's only been there for the last maybe 2 years. He started in 2017, making an impact. He's always on television doing some great things. So fortunate that he was here to be part of the podcast, so we definitely thank him. I do briefly want to go over some headlines that we have in the Amsterdam News this week. Our first one on our front page, written by Stefan Johnson, is Bill de Blasio's presidential run. Huge story going on right now. We actually said hell no on our front page, unfortunately, but we said that. You can read more about that. The headline is De Blasio won't announce presidential run this week, and that's talking about will he or won't he. And so we're definitely going to be watching and monitoring that. We're actually also going to be speaking to some people in the community about what they think about Bill de Blasio, Mayor Bill de Blasio, running for president. And we'll just see what they say. Another story that we have, the tragedy in Harlem, this fire in Harlem that killed 6 people, including 4 children. Such a terrible situation. We actually were at the vigil a couple nights ago here in the community. It happened here in Harlem. If you don't know, there's a lot of different things being said, from smoke detectors to a stove being stayed on. Really more of a safety issue, but the community is definitely rallying around that family. There's actually a GoFundMe page for that family, because obviously it's such a big loss to the community, and we definitely want to put the word out there and message to help those people out. So we'll actually get that information on our website. And lastly, a story that I actually wrote, a recent audit of ACS by City Comptroller Scott Stringer, highlighting some of the discrepancies within the Administration for Children's Services that are going on when it comes to not being able to check the foster homes of where the children are going. So we're definitely going to be doing that. But you can read all those stories and more. You can pick it up on newsstands now. It's also on our website at amsterdamnews.com. Well, this concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. This is Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.